I found my textile studio stripped bare when I arrived to finish a wedding dress commission. You need to focus on finding a husband instead of playing seamstress, she sighed, folding my silk into Dalmatian bags. I stayed calm and said, I understand your concern. She didn't realize those fabrics were on consignment from international suppliers, worth $100,000 in total, and 5 brides were expecting their custom gowns next week. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of what used to be my sanctuary, casting long shadows across empty shelves that had once held treasures from around the world. My fingers traced the barren cutting table where hand-woven silk from Lyon had waited for transformation, where vintage lace from Brussels had dreamed of becoming part of someone's perfect day. The industrial sewing machines stood like abandoned soldiers, their purpose stripped away along with everything else that had made this room magical. I've been designing custom couture for over 15 years, building my reputation stitch by careful stitch, through late nights and early mornings, through tears of frustration and moments of pure creative ecstasy. What started as alterations in my college dorm had evolved into something extraordinary, something that made grown women cry tears of joy when they saw themselves transformed in my mirrors. Celebrities flew in from both coasts for my work, often bringing their own security teams and signing ironclad NDAs. Fashion magazines featured my designs in spreads other designers would kill for, calling my techniques revolutionary and my aesthetic timeless. Just last month, Vogue had called my atelier the hidden gem of American couture, and the article had brought in booking requests faster than I could process them, each more prestigious than the last. But to my mother, I was still just playing dress-up with expensive toys, living in a fantasy world that needed to be dismantled for my own good. Gabriella, sweetheart, you're 32. Her voice drifted from the kitchen as I stood in the wreckage of my life's work, each word falling like drops of acid on my skin. She appeared in the doorway, coffee mug in hand, looking pleased with herself, like she'd just completed a particularly satisfying spring cleaning that would finally set her wayward daughter on the right path. Don't you think it's time to put away childish things and focus on what really matters in life? I turned slowly, my trained eye cataloging the destruction with the same precision I used to examine a delicate vintage seam for authenticity. Every bolt, every swatch, every carefully curated piece of my collection was gone, like it had never existed. The Hermes scarves I'd deconstructed for inspiration were missing from their climate-controlled drawer where they'd waited for the perfect project. The 1920s beadwork samples that had taken me 3 years to authenticate through museums and private collectors had vanished from their archival boxes. The hand-dyed silks from a monastery in Tibet, pieces that had required a personal pilgrimage and 6 months of correspondence in broken English and Mandarin to acquire, were nowhere to be seen. Where did it go? My voice remained steady, professional, controlled, the same tone I used with difficult clients who wanted to change their entire vision 3 days before their wedding. The voice that had learned to stay calm in any crisis. The church was having a clothing drive for the less fortunate, she said, waving dismissively as if she just donated old magazines or outdated electronics. Father Martinez was so grateful when I called him this morning. He said they could make blankets and simple clothes for the homeless shelter downtown. Such a better use than just sitting here collecting dust. Blankets, from silk that cost $800 per yard. Simple clothes from lace that had been handmade by artisans whose families had guarded their techniques for centuries, passed down through generations like precious family recipes. I see. I pulled out my phone, fingers moving to the camera app with muscle memory born from years of documenting every stage of my creative process. Documentation was everything in this business. Evidence of provenance and authenticity that could make or break a designer's reputation. When exactly did this happen? This morning, while you were at that photographer's thing, she said, sipping her coffee. The casual gesture somehow made everything worse, like she was discussing the weather instead of the destruction of my career. Really, darling, you spend more time playing dress-up for magazines and looking for a decent man. Your cousin Patricia just got engaged to that lovely orthodontist from Westchester. Now that's a stable future, a real relationship with real prospects. The photographer's thing. She meant the Vanity Fair shoot where they featured 3 of my designs on A-list actresses for their annual Hollywood issue, a spread that had taken 6 months to coordinate and would be seen by millions worldwide. The same shoot that had booked me solid for the next 18 months and caught the attention of major fashion houses in Paris and Milan. offers that could change my entire life trajectory. I photographed the empty shelves, the abandoned cutting table, the industrial sewing machines that looked lost without their fabric companions, like musicians without their instruments. Evidence. Always collect evidence. My grandmother had taught me that when she showed me how to document vintage pieces for insurance purposes, how to protect yourself in a business where authenticity was everything and forgery was rampant. You know, she continued, settling into the antique armchair that had been my grandmother's workstation, where 4 generations of women in my family had created beautiful things with their hands and hearts. Your father and I have been talking about this for months. This whole sewing business was cute when you were younger, a nice creative outlet, but it's not a real career. You can't build a future on playing with pretty fabrics and living in fantasyland. Playing. That word again, like a knife twisting in an old wound. As if the midnight hours I spent hand-beating bodices were some elaborate game of make-believe. As if the tears of joy from brides seeing themselves transformed in my mirrors were just pretend emotions that didn't matter. As if the international suppliers who flew to New York specifically to meet with me were just humoring a child with delusions of grandeur. I've actually been quite successful, I said quietly, still documenting the scene with the methodical precision that had become second nature after years of photographing my work for clients and publications. The business has grown significantly this year. I'm booked through next Christmas, and I just turned down 3 major collaboration offers because I'm at capacity. Oh honey. Her laugh was sharp as broken glass, cutting through the morning air like shattered crystal. I've seen your little Etsy shop and your Instagram posts with all those hashtags. Very nice hobby, very creative outlet. But Patricia's fiancé makes real money in the real world. He has a practice, a future, actual stability. Health insurance, a retirement plan. Things that matter when you're building a life. Etsy shop. I almost smiled at that, the irony bitter on my tongue. If she only knew that my little hobby had generated more revenue last quarter than most small businesses see in a year. That I turned down her reality TV show because it would cheapen my brand. That the dress I'd finished last week would be worn by an Oscar winner to next month's premiere, photographed by every major publication in the world, and probably displayed in the Costume Institute someday. That 3 major fashion houses had approached me about acquisition deals that would set me up for life. Offers that came with private jets and apartments in Paris. The thing is, Mom, I said, sliding my phone back into my pocket and turning to face her with the full weight of 15 years of expertise behind my words. Those fabrics weren't just mine. She paused, coffee mug halfway to her lips, something in my tone finally penetrating her maternal certainty. What do you mean they weren't yours? They were in your studio. They were on consignment from suppliers in Europe, Asia, South America. Each piece was tagged, cataloged, and insured through Lloyd's of London, with paperwork more complex than most people's mortgages. I don't own them until I use them in commission pieces or purchase them outright after completing a project. The color drained from her face like water from a broken vase, leaving her looking pale and suddenly fragile. Consignment? What does that mean exactly? It means the silk you just donated. The cream pieces with the gold threads you probably thought were just pretty fabric. That's from Maison Pro in Lyon. They've been weaving for the French court since 1752, surviving revolutions and wars. This particular lot is worth about $40,000. I kept my voice conversational, as if we were discussing grocery prices instead of her financial ruin. The vintage lace from the Lefebvre workshop that you saw as old doilies, another $30,000. The beadwork samples from India you probably thought were just pretty decorations. $25,000 minimum. And that's just the material cost, not including the cultural significance or the 3 years it took to source them. Her coffee mug slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor in a spray of ceramic and dark liquid that spread like blood across the pale wood. That's impossible. It's just fabric, just thread and cloth and pretty colors. Just fabric. I nodded, stepping carefully around the broken pieces that seemed to mirror the shattered remains of our relationship. Like the Mona Lisa is just paint on canvas. Like a Stradivarius is just wood and strings. She stood quickly, hands shaking as she tried to process what I just told her, the magnitude of her mistake finally beginning to sink in. Well, we'll just go get it back right now. I'll call Father Martinez immediately. This is all just a misunderstanding that we can clear up. I'll explain that I made a mistake. I'm afraid it's not that simple, I said, pulling out my tablet and swiping to the insurance documentation and supplier contracts I always kept on hand for exactly these types of emergencies. See, when you removed the fabrics from my studio without permission, you technically committed theft of property belonging to international suppliers. Property that's tracked, insured, and monitored through one of the most sophisticated systems in the luxury goods industry. Her face went white as fresh cotton, all the color leaching out until she looked like a ghost of herself. You're being dramatic. I'm your mother. I was helping you. I was trying to save you from wasting your life on this obsession. Were you helping when you threw away my pattern drafts last month? The ones that took 3 weeks to perfect. I scrolled through photos on my tablet, showing her images of hand-drawn designs that represented hundreds of hours of work. The ones that were for commission pieces with deadlines. Those were just papers with lines on them. Scribbles and doodles that didn't mean anything real. They were commission designs for the Marceau wedding. You know, the tech billionaire's daughter whose wedding is being covered by every major publication in the world. She's paying me $60,000 for a custom gown based on those scribbles, and the exposure will be worth 10 times that. The silence stretched between us like a taut thread ready to snap under the pressure. I watched her process the information, saw the exact moment she realized the magnitude of what she'd done. It was like watching someone step off a cliff in slow motion, the moment of weightlessness before the fall. "We'll fix this," she whispered, her voice suddenly small and fragile like a child's. "I'll make some calls. I'll explain to Father Martinez that there was a mistake. We'll get everything back before anyone notices what happened." "Actually, I already made some calls," I said, showing her my phone screen where missed call notifications were stacking up like fallen dominoes. "I called my insurance company first, then my suppliers in France, Italy, and India. Then my lawyer. He's quite good, specializes in fashion industry contracts and intellectual property law." "Your lawyer?" Her voice cracked like old leather left in the sun too long. "Marcus Wellington from Wellington, Kessler and Associates. You might have heard of him if you read the business section. He handles contracts for most of the major designers in New York, Ralph Lauren, Marc Jacobs, several others I'm not allowed to name due to confidentiality agreements. Very thorough with documentation, very experienced with exactly this type of situation." She sank back into the chair, suddenly looking older than her 58 years, like she aged a decade in the span of our conversation. Her perfectly styled hair seemed to wilt, and her expensive makeup couldn't hide the growing panic in her eyes. "Gabriella, you're scaring me with all this legal talk." "You know what scared me, Mom? Walking into my studio and finding 15 years of work erased, like it never existed, like it never mattered." I walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I used to sketch designs under the old oak tree, back when I still believed my family understood what I was building. "Do you know how long it takes to build relationships with suppliers at this level? How many trips to Europe, how many trade shows, how many late nights building trust with artisans who guard their techniques like family secrets?" I turned back to face her, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't try to soften my words to protect her feelings. "The silk from Lyon. That relationship started with my great-grandmother in 1953. 4 generations of trust, 4 generations of proving ourselves worthy of their finest work. The supplier doesn't just sell to anyone with money. They have to know you, respect your work, believe in your vision for their art." "I didn't know any of this," she whispered, the words barely audible. "You didn't ask." The simple truth hung in the air between us like smoke. "You saw pretty fabrics and assumed they were toys, like everything else I do, like everything I've ever accomplished in my entire career." My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I glanced at it, then showed her the screen without comment. "Spoke with insurance adjuster and 3 suppliers. Documentation is solid. Churches don't carry coverage for this level of specialized loss. Full liability falls to whoever removed the property. Contract violations could add another $200K. Call me ASAP." She read it twice, her hands trembling like autumn leaves in a strong wind. "What does that mean, exactly? In real terms?" "It means you're personally liable for the replacement cost of everything you gave away, plus penalties for breach of contract with my clients, plus potential criminal charges for theft of international luxury goods." I sat across from her, my voice gentle now that the bomb had been dropped and the explosion was inevitable. "The fabrics alone will run about $100,000 to replace. assuming the suppliers will even work with someone connected to this situation, which they probably won't. The contract violations of my existing clients could add another $200,000 in penalties and legal fees. But I don't have that kind of money, she said, the reality finally hitting her like a physical blow. The house is worth maybe $300,000, and we still owe $150,000 on the mortgage. Your father's retirement account isn't that much, and we're both too old to start over financially. I know, I leaned forward, genuine sympathy in my voice despite everything. That's what makes this so tragic and unnecessary. The doorbell rang, its sharp tone cutting through the tension like scissors through silk. Through the front window, I could see a man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase and checking his watch with the precision of someone who bills by the hour and considers time more valuable than gold. That would be Marcus, I said, standing and smoothing my skirt with hands that were perfectly steady. My lawyer. She grabbed my arm as I passed, her grip desperate and surprisingly strong for someone who spent most of her time at the country club. Please, Gabriella, I'm your mother. I was trying to help. I thought if you focus on finding a husband, starting a real family instead of this fantasy world of dresses and fashion shows. You thought wrong. I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm, the gesture final and decisive. But don't worry, I have a solution that should work for everyone involved. Hope flickered in her eyes like a candle in wind, desperate and fragile. What kind of solution? Well, you've been saying I need stability, right? A real career with actual prospects and a future. She nodded eagerly, like a drowning person reaching for a rope thrown from shore. Good news then. I just accepted a position as head designer for Maison Laurent in Paris. You know, the fashion house that's been courting me for 6 months. The one I kept turning down because I wanted to stay close to family. Her face crumpled like discarded tissue paper, all the hope draining out in an instant. Paris? You're moving to Paris? To France? The contract is for 5 years, renewable if both parties are satisfied. Base salary is €400,000, plus royalties on any designs that go into production, plus a housing allowance, plus creative control over my own line. I paused at the door, letting that information sink in like dye into fabric. They're also purchasing my client list and assuming all existing contracts, including the insurance liability for today's incident. Turns out having someone steal your entire inventory is excellent leverage in acquisition negotiations. You're leaving? You're actually leaving the country. I'm pursuing stability and a real career with actual prospects, exactly what you said I needed. Isn't that what you wanted for me? Marcus Wellington looked exactly like what central casting would order for a high-powered attorney who eats opposing counsel for breakfast and considers it a light snack. Silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a handshake that could crush stone without effort. He surveyed the empty studio with the efficiency of a crime scene investigator, making notes on a tablet that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Gabriella, I'm deeply sorry for your loss, he said, setting his briefcase on the cutting table with careful precision, treating the space with the respect it deserved. I've handled a lot of destroyed studios over the years, but this level of systematic decimation is unusual. Usually, we see theft, fire, flood, acts of God. This is more personal. My mother hovered in the doorway like a ghost, clearly wanting to flee but afraid to move, trapped by the consequences of her own actions. Mr. Wellington, I'm Helen Morrison, Gabriella's mother. There's been a terrible misunderstanding here that I'm sure we can resolve. He turned to her with the smile of the shark who just spotted blood in crystal clear water, polite yet predatory. Mrs. Morrison. Yes, I've heard quite a lot about your intervention this morning. Quite remarkable, really. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen someone generate this level of legal exposure in a single morning while genuinely believing they were being helpful. It was just fabric, she said weakly, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears now that she understood the reality. Was it? He opened his briefcase with the dramatic flair of a magician about to reveal the impossible, pulling out a thick folder stuffed with documents that rustled like silk in the quiet room. Let's see what we're actually dealing with here, shall we? Hand-woven silk from Maison Prel in Lyon, established 1752. Current waitlist for new clients, 7 years. They don't take American Express, and they certainly don't deal with people who can't prove their bona fides in the fashion industry. He flipped pages with the efficiency of someone who'd done this dance many times before, each document another nail in the coffin of her confidence. Vintage Alençon lace from the Lefebvre workshop. 5 generations of master lace makers, techniques passed down like religious secrets. This particular piece was from their 1960s collection, authenticated and certified by the International Textile Heritage Foundation. Replacement cost, assuming they even sell to you after this incident, which they absolutely won't, is approximately $45,000. My mother made a small choking sound, like someone who'd just been punched in the solar plexus by reality itself. Tibetan silk, hand-dyed by monks at the Semi monastery using techniques that date back to the 12th century and are considered sacred art forms. They produce only 20 yards per year for the entire world market, and clients are chosen based on spiritual as well as artistic merit. He looked up from his papers with the expression of a doctor delivering terminal news to a patient in denial. This particular commission took 3 years to fulfill, required personal references from 2 other monastery suppliers, and involved a pilgrimage your daughter made at considerable personal expense. No replacement possible, at any price, ever. "I'll pay for everything," she whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush of desperation. "I'll take out a loan, mortgage the house, sell my car, liquidate our retirement accounts, whatever it takes. I'll make this right somehow." "Mrs. Morrison," Marcus said gently, his voice taking on the patient tone usually reserved for small children or the mentally impaired. "Your house is worth approximately $300,000, minus your existing mortgage of $150,000. Your car is a 2019 Honda CR-V worth maybe $18,000 on the current market. Your husband's retirement account, according to public records, is valued at roughly $200,000. The total replacement cost, including penalties and contract violations, is just over $450,000. Plus my legal fees, which I can assure you are not insignificant." The numbers hit her like physical blows, each figure another weight added to her shoulders until she could barely stand. She stumbled backward, catching herself against the doorframe as her legs gave out, the full scope of her financial destruction finally becoming clear. "However," Marcus continued, consulting his notes with the air of someone delivering both bad and good news in the same breath, "there is some genuinely good news here. Maison Laurent has agreed to absorb the entire liability as part of their acquisition of your daughter's business. Very generous of them, really. They didn't have to do that, but they view it as an investment in their new head designer's peace of mind." "What does that mean in practical terms?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means your daughter is free to pursue her new career in Paris without the burden of your actions weighing her down like concrete boots around her ankles." He smiled with what might have been genuine warmth, the first human emotion he'd shown since arriving. Clean slate, fresh start, new life in one of the fashion capitals of the world. Exactly what every mother wants for her child, I imagine. I watched her face as the reality settled in like sediment in still water, heavy and permanent. No criminal charges that would destroy her reputation in the community, no financial ruin that would leave them homeless in their golden years, but also no daughter. She'd gotten exactly what she asked for, just not in the packaging she expected. "When do you leave?" she asked quietly, defeat clear in every syllable. "Tomorrow night. Maison Laurent is sending a car to pick me up at 6, then a private jet to Charles de Gaulle Airport." I moved around the studio one last time, saying goodbye to the space that had been my whole world for so many years. Each empty corner held memories of late nights and early mornings, of creative breakthroughs and moments of pure artistic joy. The house will stay in the family, of course. I've already had the deed transferred to you and Dad, free and clear. Consider it a goodbye gift. Gabriella, please, can't we talk about this like adults? Can't we work something out that doesn't involve you moving to another continent? "We are talking about it," I said, picking up the last item from my desk, a small framed photo of my grandmother teaching me to sew when I was 7, both of us bent over her old Singer machine with expressions of intense concentration and shared purpose. "You wanted me to have a real career with stability and prospects. You wanted me to stop playing with pretty fabrics and focus on what really matters. Congratulations, your plan worked perfectly." Marcus packed his papers with the efficiency of someone who'd done this routine 1,000 times, each document sliding into place like pieces of a well-oiled machine. The movers will be here tonight at 8 for the equipment. Maison Laurent is shipping everything to their Paris atelier via private freight. State-of-the-art facility, I'm told. Windows facing the scene, full climate control, enough space for 12 seamstresses and 2 cutting tables. As we walked toward the front door, my mother followed like a lost child. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that she'd destroyed the very thing she claimed to want to protect. Will you call, write letters, send pictures of your new life? I'll be very busy, I said, not unkindly, but without the false comfort that would only prolong the inevitable. Building that stability you wanted for me, creating that real future you thought I needed, working with people who understand the value of what I do. The car was waiting outside, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows that screamed money and discretion. As I loaded my suitcases into the trunk, neighbors gathered on their porches to watch the show, sensing drama in the way that small communities always do. By tonight, everyone would know that Helen Morrison's daughter was moving to Paris after some kind of family drama involving lawyers and expensive items. Mrs. Morrison, Marcus said, handing her an expensive business card with raised lettering that caught the morning sunlight. If you ever need legal advice about respecting other people's property rights, intellectual property law, or international trade regulations, please don't hesitate to call. I do offer family discounts in cases of genuine remorse and documented attempts at restitution. She took the card with shaking hands, staring at it like it might contain magic words that could undo the mourning and give her back the daughter she just lost through her own actions. I hugged her goodbye, feeling how small and fragile she seemed in my arms, like a bird with broken wings who'd forgotten how to fly. Take care of yourself, Mom. Maybe take up a hobby in your retirement. I hear sewing is very relaxing and therapeutic, and there are some wonderful classes at the community center. The driver held the door open for me with the practiced courtesy of someone who chauffeurs important people on a regular basis, and I slid into leather seats that smelled like success and new beginnings. Through the window, I watched my mother standing on the porch, still holding Marcus's card, looking lost in her own life and unable to understand how helping had turned into losing. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. Some threads, once cut, couldn't be rewoven no matter how much you wanted to repair the damage. But that was the beauty of couture and the beauty of life itself. Every piece was unique, irreplaceable, and exactly as it was meant to be. 6 months later, I was putting the finishing touches on a gown for the Cannes Film Festival when my assistant knocked on the atelier door. The Paris studio was everything I dreamed of and more. Soaring ceilings that seemed to reach toward heaven, perfect natural light that made every fabric glow like stained glass, and enough space to spread out the most elaborate designs without feeling cramped. The view of the scene from my cutting table was worth the price of admission alone, inspiring me every morning as I began work. Gabriella, there's a call for you on line 2. Says she's your mother. I looked up from the intricate beadwork that had taken me 3 days to perfect, tiny crystal placed with the precision of a surgeon and the soul of an artist. Around me, 4 other seamstresses worked on various projects, the quiet hum of creativity filling the air like incense in a cathedral of fashion. Take a message, please. I'm working on something important that can't be interrupted. Through the tall windows of the Maison Laurent atelier, Paris stretched out like a bolt of silver silk under the afternoon sun, the city alive with possibility and promise. The light caught the sequins on my current project, sending tiny rainbows across the cutting table where fabric worth more than most people's annual salaries waited to be transformed into something magical and eternal. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant moments later. Your mother says she's learned to sew, wants to show you what she's made, says she understands now what she destroyed and wants to make amends. I smiled, returning to my work with the focus that had made me one of the most sought-after designers in Europe, my hands steady and sure as they had been for 15 years. Some threads, once cut, couldn't be rewoven no matter how much skill you possessed or how deeply you regretted the cutting. But that was the beauty of couture and the beauty of life itself. Every piece was unique, irreplaceable, and exactly as it was meant to be from the very first stitch. Outside, the city hummed with the quiet efficiency of lives being lived, dreams being pursued, and fabric being transformed into something extraordinary by hands that understood the sacred nature of creation. Just as it should be. just as it always had been, just as it always would be.